So Jeep, Dodge, and Ram dealers are greatly struggling right now, and it's because of decisions that upper management has made, in big part the CEO.
The CEO of automaker Stellantis, Carlos Tavares, resigned abruptly on Sunday.
And this has caused great trust loss between the dealer body and the manufacturer. All right, so Ray, we talk about Stellantis all the time and things that are going on in the company, but we have a big problem. We have these dealers who have lost all trust in the mothership, in Jeep, Dodge, and Ram, for them to be able to make the right decisions. But we just had this this news come through that the current CEO is resigning, and we're already seeing that dealers are making comments that, okay, now they're happier about the direction that does not involve the current CEO that we have been dealing with for the last however many years. So what other things does Stellantis for Jeep, Dodge, and Ram, what do they have to do to get more on board with these dealers and be able to get a better vehicle to the consumer and be able to, at the end of the day, what really protects the trust of the dealership body is by selling more freaking cars. So really, I think that's the question. How do we sell more freaking cars if we're Stellantis?
Well, I would imagine their dealers would tell them today, based on the inventory levels that they have and the types of vehicles that they have, that if you want us to be on board with you, we're going to need to see a huge uptick in marketing and what's the word I'm looking for? Incentive spends.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. When you get my age, certain things escape you, like apparently incentives. So if I were the dealer body, that's what I'd be telling them. You want us to, you need to help bail us out of this stuff that we have here. Some of it being 2023s that you don't want to give us any money to move these days, but we're going to need to see big money for incentives to move all this aged inventory we have. Then, once we've gotten our inventory situation under control, then we can start looking at what are the things we're going to build moving forward. And I would think, in order to get more dealers on board, they're going to need to have more dealer meetings, whether they go into large metropolitan areas and they set up a dealer meeting with the 10 or 12 Stellantis dealers in that area, and actually encourage them to share what they're seeing on the ground and what it is that their customers are telling them. So that I think will be the first thing in order to earn back dealer trust.
So something that's interesting with all this negative news that we've seen.
Stellantis shares falling after the CEO, Carlos Tavares, resigned abruptly in Phil LeBeau.
With the company's recent struggles, and say they don't understand it. As you just mentioned, another 1,000 employees laid off.
Now we've seen the CEO resign. Stellantis has actually seen its sales improve over the last couple months. And the reason why they have is because they've increased incentives. And they've seen that their share grow from 7.2% to about 8%. And it's all about price point, right? So I feel like it doesn't necessarily matter who you're talking about, who Stellantis has angered, where you're talking about your consumer, where you're talking about your dealer. And then when the dealers and the consumers are not happy, meaning they're not buying, they're not selling vehicles, then your shareholders are going to get angry, right? But if we can get vehicles moved, then we can have people that are a little bit more happy, a little more excited about our brand. And what they've shown over the last couple months, well, what does this? We got to lower your freaking prices. Why didn't we start this a couple of years ago when we started to see all the poop hit the fan, for lack of better terminology? Why didn't we start years ago when we started seeing problems, and we're just doing it now? And I feel like the company is only doing it right now because they have to. Like, this is almost this is the reason why you're going to lose trust from all of your dealers, is because you're only doing things when you have to and not doing things to help the situation when there's a situation that needs to be helped.
So, if I hear you correctly, what you just said is they're being reactive instead of proactive.
Correct.
Okay, well, you asked why. Okay, here's the why. Because doing what they had been doing, their profit margins were, for the company, were running between 12 and 14%, which is unheard of for automobile manufacturers. And finally, when the poop did hit the fan and customers stopped buying vehicles, guess what happened? Now they're saying that the profit margins probably will be somewhere between 5 and 7%. That's a pretty big decline. Well, what's the cause of that decline? Well, you have to spend more to market, and you have to spend more to incentivize the sales of the vehicles. Now, if I was running the company, that would indicate to me that what we really need to do is we need to make more cheaper, less expensive vehicles to sell so that we don't have to incentivize them as much.
All right, so all of you watching here, I know most of you are not subscribed, so I need you to hit that subscribe button. Whatever we need to do to get you to hit that subscribe button, Ray will do it. So just hit it for us and let us know what he needs to do down in the comments to get you to subscribe.
It all comes down to a price point, okay? And that's what's causing this. So they can look at all the data. They know how much it costs them to move a Grand Wagoneer or a Grand Cherokee in the form of incentives. Now figure out how to produce lower trim level ones so that they already fit into the price point people are willing to pay. And then you don't have to incentivize them as much. And then what can grow again? Your profit margin? It just, maybe because I have a really simple mind that I oversimplify things, but it just, I just think we have a way that corporations like to complicate things, which is why you always have to do studies. We need to study this before you just look at the information. You can figure it out. It doesn't take much. You see what price points the people are finally willing to pay for this overpriced crap that you've been sticking them with. And now you produce lower content vehicles at a slightly lower price point so that you don't have to incentivize them as much to sell them, and you'll sell them. And that's what they ultimately they'll need to do. I would think. I could be wrong. I usually am wrong.
So you worked with, over the years, you've worked with multiple different brands.
Yes.
In your memory, what was the brand that you would say had the best relationship that you worked for with their dealer body?
The best relationship. It was usually a somewhat contentious relationship with any of the brands.
Okay.
Nissan, I remember when early on, where they actually came to us and they said, "Listen, we know people want to buy the base Sentra, but we don't have any, so don't even take deposits on them." Well, don't tell us that. Figure out how to build them. Don't tell us what you can't do. Okay, because if you're trying to sell somebody something, okay, well, you don't tell them what you can't do. You tell them what you can do. So don't come in as the manufacturer and say, "Hey, we know your customers want these, but we can't build those." No, figure out how to build them. I had, when I was with Acura, I did have one rep, a young man when he first started, college graduate, fresh in the business. And I might have been in the business, I don't know, 25, 30 years at that point. And he looked at me, and the new RL came out, and he looked at me, he said, "Well, what are you doing to sell that car?" And I looked at him and I said, "Don't ask me what I'm doing. You're the sons of bitches that produced it. What are you doing to get people excited about it? Why is it on me? Why is it on your dealer to figure out how to sell it? You're the ones that came to the conclusion that you needed to build the damn thing. How are you going to get customers excited about it?" And so it was like I learned very early on that it wasn't necessarily the partnership that they painted it to be, that the manufacturers would like to tell you is, "Oh, we have this wonderful partnership with our dealer body." No, they don't. They don't even care about their dealer body. They want to get their dealers to buy as many products as they can, whether it's the right product or not. They'll beg them to take more when they have an excess amount that they have to get rid of. So it's not really a partnership. And so I guess the answer to your question is the one that I had the best relationship with, and I fought with them the most, honestly, but I still felt it was the best relationship was with Minnie, because I could have those honest conversations with them. I mean, there were times that they hated me for having those conversations, but I felt like I could have them. Where with some of the other brands, they didn't want me to have those they didn't want to hear it from somebody that worked in a dealership. Somebody that actually had to sell the crap they were building.
So what's interesting of me doing this and covering the car market over the last 2 years now, and hearing you talk about it for a while, and your experience with these dealerships and these manufacturers, it almost seems like the dealers and the manufacturers are constantly at each other's throats all the time. And what is very confusing to me is that this dynamic, it's almost like you don't see this anywhere else in business, because the manufacturers, their customers are the dealers. So
Yes.
you want to do everything. I'm trying to do everything in my power. I'm a small used car dealer. I'm trying to do everything in my power to gain my customers' trust,
Yes.
to gain my customers their bit where they go to buy a car. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to do all that so I can gain their money, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's
Exactly.
what you do in business. You want to find your customer. You want to do everything you can to have them buy from you, and it's a win-win relationship for you and your customer.
Yes.
In the car market, it does not seem like that at all. Why is this the case? Is it because that the dealers have a monopoly on where the manufacturers have to send their cars, and also the manufacturers have a monopoly of who basically has to buy their cars? And is that the situation that arises?
Well, the big manufacturers are all publicly traded companies.
Right.
So who do they answer to? Stockholders.
Yeah.
Okay. So they have to show why the stock values keep going up. They want to make sure stock values keep rising. Sometimes in order to have your stock values continue to rise, you don't necessarily need to be producing the things that your customers, the dealers, are actually asking for, because maybe what the dealers are asking for doesn't give you the profit margin that you need to show your stockholders so that your stock value can continue to go up. So I think ultimately what happens is you have competing interests here, and those interests aren't necessarily aligned. The interest for the manufacturer is how to grow the stock value for their stockholders. That's their fiduciary responsibility, is to try and take care of their stockholders. The dealership is typically, if it's not a publicly traded group, and yes, there's 6 large publicly traded groups that own, between the 6 of them, 1,200 dealerships in the United States out of 18,000. They're public and they're big, but they ain't that big. So, there's smaller groups that don't own them. And oftentimes the smaller groups are not publicly owned, not publicly traded. They're privately owned. And so they're just trying to figure out how they can increase their earnings, their income. And for them, it could be, well, we need cheaper cars, or we need bigger incentives, or we need bigger profit margins built into the cars. How are you going to do that, Mr. Manufacturer? So there's these giant competing interests that aren't necessarily aligned. And so when that's the case, very rarely do you end up in a situation where the dealers feel all warm and fuzzy about the manufacturer whose product they're selling. It just, I used to say it all the time to my general manager at the Acura store in Scottsdale. If we do everything it is that they're asking us to do, and we end up losing money for the year based on us doing what it is they asked us to do, are they going to write us a check to make us whole so that we at least break even? And the response from my general managers every year was, well, no, they're not. Well, then why should we do what it is that they want us to do, which doesn't necessarily align with what is best for us to do? There's the dilemma.
And this is the thing that's just never made sense to me since I've been looking into this. I just don't know, and it seems like I talk to salespeople now. I talk to franchise managers, and they don't have anything positive to say about their brands that they're representing. Like they'll say, okay, this is a cool car. We're doing some good deals on this or whatever. But when then you go and start talking about Stellantis, they're like, well, what they really should be doing is giving us some vehicles with lower MSRP, or what they really should be doing is making something that somebody's actually excited about. And it seems like there's just big disconnect from dealership and like a company like Stellantis, where it's like they're not working together. It's like they're enemies when they're supposed to be drumming up attention for their product together.
It is. Here's a perfect example. Every time a manufacturer comes up with a new model, they've done studies. They have an idea as to who it is that's going to buy the model, buy that vehicle, the age group that it's going to appeal to, the income level of the people that it's going to appeal to. And then they introduce the model, and reality never lines up with what they thought it was going to be. So the problem becomes is the manufacturer believes in their heart of hearts that they know better than their customers as to what it is that they want, when in reality they should be listening to their customers, the ultimate retail customers, about what it is that they want. But they would rather try to dictate to the customer what it is that you want. Don't worry about it, Mr. Customer. We hear you, but we're telling you this is really what you want. And ultimately what happens is when they make a mistake, the original Acura ZDX, for example, what happens ultimately is the customer revolts and says, I don't care that you're telling me this should be what I want. Not only don't I want it, I won't come anywhere near it to even consider buying it. Listen to them. Ask them. A ZDX.
Yeah, I just want to pull up a good reminder for you. So whenever you have something like this sitting in your dealership, and I'm assuming that since Acura knew everything and how awesome this thing was, they probably recommended that you put it in your showroom.
Oh, absolutely.
And you have, this thing's sitting in your showroom.
Yeah.
And you have customers coming in and say, man, this is the ugliest, dumbest car I've ever seen in my life.
The marketing behind it was supposed to be the ultimate weekend getaway car. Okay. And it was like, this was the answer to the question that no customer ever asked. Okay. It was just you couldn't, as a living, breathing human being, it was virtually impossible because of the roof line and as to how high the back seats were. It was virtually impossible for a human being, even of my stature, 5'6", ladies and gentlemen. Okay, 5'6", 202 pounds. It was virtually impossible for someone of my stature to even try to get into the back seat. One car magazine in its review called getting into the back seat human origami. Okay, it was, you could not sit back there. So you had this big ass vehicle, okay, the size of an MDX, that was really a two-seater. Who the hell asked for that? Okay, and it was expensive for that ultimate weekend getaway that nobody was looking to take. And that's what happens. So they misconstrue what they think, or who they think a vehicle will appeal to. And it is frightening as to how often they are incorrect. So I don't know. Well, I used to say this in dealerships. Why don't we ask the customers how to actually improve the sales process, as opposed to us thinking we know? Because that's the same thing that happens in a dealership. Everybody would hear, well, the customers are unhappy with this, or they're unhappy with that. We need to improve the process. Well, the thought of improving the process never included the thought of asking the customer. It was always like, well, we know better than the customer does as to what's going to make them happy when they're buying the car. Well, you can't really know that if you don't ask them, if you don't ask them to be a part of the equation. So it is, the manufacturers do it, the dealers do it. Everybody avoids actually asking the ultimate retail customer what the hell it is that they want. So you're always working with bad information if you're not including input from your ultimate customer. There's a certain level of I don't want to use the word stupidity, but it's there's just this level of thinking you know better, that you're smarter than your customers. You're not. So it was just like, I don't know who they thought they were appealing to. I don't know who they thought they were listening to when somebody signed off on this, but obviously somebody signed off and said, "Oh my goodness, this is a great idea. Think of the 3 or 4 that we're going to sell annually."
Well, from the manufacturer standpoint, I mean, we're going back to Stellantis again, but when the dealerships take the cars, does Stellantis, like, in the short term, they don't care. Like, they're raking, like 2 years ago, they raked in some money because dealerships were taking all of these vehicles. And so they're okay. Well, if dealerships are taking them, we're just going to keep making them. And then you got to that time period where, okay, Stellantis saw that their dealership body, their inventory was going up and going up at an alarming rate. So at that point, what does Stellantis do? Well, in my mind, and what I read, it looks like they kind of put the pedal to the metal and started even producing more and try to get as many to this dealership body as they could. So I almost wonder if Stellantis did a lot of these dealerships dirty intentionally because they knew that product was not selling, but they still made a lot of these dealerships. Maybe made is the wrong word, but still
Strongly
recommended. Yeah, strongly encouraged that they took all of this inventory that they still were making massive margins on.
Yeah, because if you take 10 of these that we know are a little slower selling, well, we'll give you 5 of these real hot sellers, and the dealers are going, okay, we'll do that. Not realizing that, well, the 10 that aren't selling are going to sit there for, I don't know, a year, maybe more. It's very rarely does the manufacturer have the dealership's best interests at heart. Let me think about that for a second. Okay. Almost never does the manufacturer have the dealership's best interest at heart. They just don't. And let's face it, they've The manufacturers made all the money they're going to make on this vehicle once they've invoiced it and shipped it to the dealer. When the dealer ultimately sells it to the ultimate retail customer, then that vehicle can start actually costing the manufacturer money. And the reason I say that is there's a thing called warranty work. So that when something breaks on the car under warranty, well, now that's an expense to the manufacturer, an expense that if the car sits for 545 days, that's an expense that's been put off for 545 days because the warranty hasn't started yet. So when all those vehicles are sitting there, Stellantis hasn't had to pay a dime in warranty work. It's when they ultimately get sold that then their expense starts to go up on those vehicles. So, yeah, they're very happy just to see them sit at the dealership. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, tell every living person you know that they need to subscribe to Car Sense with Brandon and Ray.